Hi there, it's Nicole here today for Hero Arts and My Monthly Hero. This is the October 2017 card kit plus add-ons, and I'm going to share with you 3 different projects I created with the main kit first and then some add-ons. So from the main October kit, I am using not only the border dies, the specialty dies from the kit, but some of the specialty paper from the kit and the stamps and dies. What is amazing about this stamp set is there are so many different little teeny tiny scenes you can create with the images from this set. It is super adorable. Look how cute this is. I'm creating a Christmas village, but you could create a little winterish type village. You could create Santa flying high above, the city. You can do all kinds of things perfect for winter and the holiday season. I'm going to start by bringing in some of the elements for my background. To build my background, I've die cut some Bristol Smooth cardstock with the tree border die. Then I'm going to use the specialty paper from the kit that has that kind of bubbly finish to it and die cut the mountain borders from this. I like it because I kind of think it gives it that snowy type of look. And then just to kind of double check and make sure everything is going to work and fit the way I think it's going to in my mind, I'm going to lay out some of the buildings, the railroad track, the train. I'm going to grab my dies as well. This is where the play part of it comes in, where you can move your things around, kind of check everything. I like to double check, especially if I'm implementing a lot of different stamps like I am here today. This little village ends up being quite full, but the images are so small that you can really fit a lot in here if you want to. And you guys know me, I am a huge fan of scene building, period. So oftentimes I will kind of go over the top. You could do a much simpler scene if you wanted to. It is completely up to you. On my background, I've got another piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and this is where my greeting is going to go. I'm taking a greeting from this main stamp set from the October card kit. In fact, everything in this card is from the main kit only. I really wanted to show that even if you can just pick up the main kit, you can create fantastic cards. The add-ons are amazing and wonderful, and I really highly recommend them. There is not a single stamp in any of the add-ons that I don't love. This is probably one of the best kits I have ever seen. It's one of my absolute favorites. I really, really love it for creating holiday cards. However, if you can only pick up one, the main kit is amazing. You get these specialty papers, you get all these stamps, you get the dies, and there are not dies for each and every little teeny tiny image in there. If they were to have done that, there is no way the price point could be where it would be. Plus, that would be a boatload of dies and little teeny tiny dies at that. So I wanted to show how you can mix and match those elements. Some of them that don't have dies with some that do. Real quick, the images, the greeting and the snowy images that I used from the stamp set that I stamped with Versamark, embossed with white embossing powder. I'm doing embossed resist here with Salty Ocean and Tumbled Glass Distress ink. It's very, very light blue, going to kind of help build that sky type of scene. I wanted it to be very soft. In fact, I went too dark. You can see the blueprint sketch there on my background paper. I had to redo it. I did not like it the first time. And then very lightly against that tree border, I applied Forest Moss Distress ink, but only a little ways down, very light hand, because I want the bottom portion, instead of adding another layer of paper, I want my stamping to actually go on this panel. There's quite a bit of layers going on here already. So at this point, I really feel like trying to keep that to a minimum. The train really needs to be stamped first. There are not coordinating dies for the train. Because there are not coordinating dies, I need to work on the train track and train first and work the rest of my scene around them. The train's going to go along the bottom edge. I kind of messed around with this, trying to figure out the best way to do it. And I really think that what worked the best for me was stamping the train track first and then building the train on top of that. For whatever reason, that just worked well. I used some Simon Says Stamp dark chocolate ink to stamp my train track. On that, I'm going to start building my actual train now. So the best way for this, I feel like, is stamping them one at a time. And I did start with the middle train car and work my way out so I could kind of somewhat center it. I just eyeballed it. I didn't measure. And this makes it a lot easier, I think, because then you can get them right up next to each other. If you stamp them all at once, there's going to be a little space between each, which would be easily fixed by just drawing a little black line. It's just not going to connect if you try to stamp them all at once. A lot of times, especially with as detailed of a scene as this particular card, I will continuously check to make sure that I am working and stamping what needs to be stamped next in the right order, I guess, if that makes sense. This is like a little ground image from the stamp set that I'm going to stamp a couple times because it's going to give me a great place to stamp or to adhere my buildings and stamp some of those additional images. I've got some trees, I've got a light post, different things like that. I really probably should have removed that textury paper. It didn't really affect the snowy ground, but it could have. So here is my double check. I want my little buildings to all be there. I want a light post. I want trees. I need to get my spacing correct. And not everything's going to be stamped in the same color. The light post, some black ink. Then I'm going to stamp my tree, and the first tree I'm going to stamp, I'm going to use Simon Says Stamp Evergreen ink, and then I will use that dark chocolate ink for one of the others. But this just is a scene building thing. Then down by the railroad tracks, I've got my Santa's Workshop sign. I am going to add a snowman here in a little bit. Some of the images I added after I had built and colored the initial scene. I didn't add Santa and Mrs. Claus until almost the end, as well as a few extra pieces. But because those trees and the light post do not have coordinating dies, I like to double check that I'm not stamping the images too close together. I want there to be room for everything on my card. A couple, like the clock tower and the train station, are going to overlap a little bit, which I wanted them to. I think that makes it look a little more interesting. But I definitely don't want them to be so much so that you lose all of the clock tower, since it will be back behind the train station. I have stamped my buildings. I have got my other stamping all done, at least the first layer of stamping, and I'm going to color everything in. I'm going to speed through this because this is a very long video. It's got 3 projects in it. So the coloring is kind of more of, that's not really the technique here, I guess. It's more of the scene building, more of ideas on how to scene build and how to successfully scene build. Coloring can be done with whatever medium you prefer. I used Copics. They can be a little tricky. I wish I had some of the fine tips for my Copics. I probably need to get some. These images are kind of small. However, if you have good nibs on your markers, you probably won't have any trouble. And because they're so small, this isn't really a coloring tutorial, if that makes sense. I left the coloring in because I know a lot of you really enjoy that, but it is maybe 2, sometimes 3 colors, or 3 shades per color, but most of the time just one or two. Some of these little areas are so small, there's really no need for blending. You can't really blend anything. At least I can't. I'm a pretty simple colorer as far as that goes. The red areas I did, couple of shades for the green, but only one for yellow. The buildings, again, very small, but very detailed. And they are really cute. I think they're fun to color. I found these really fun to color. Especially the more of the image you get colored, the more interesting they are. They really are an adorable little Christmas village, or form a cute little Christmas village, and I think there are lots of great ways to use these. And you wouldn't definitely not have to go quite as detailed as I did. I imagined this kind of as the North Pole, a winter village, you know, Santa and Mrs. Claus out there greeting the train coming into the station, kind of just that kind of thing. I think anyone would enjoy getting a little holiday card like this. Happy and fun. I love happy and fun. Minimal green accents. I really kind of kept to red, white, and gray or black, just for interest. For the white areas of the building, very, very, very light, warm grays. Tiny bits of yellow in the windows. And then for the snowy feel, just like along the ground, I used very light blue colors and blended it out with the very lightest blue I could find. It gives the snow a hint of color without overpowering the image. Everything is colored in very similar colors. I really didn't use that many Copic markers. I kept it pretty simple. Like I said, these are very small images, so I didn't want to go too crazy here. And I like the repetition of color. I went pretty traditional. You could definitely do something a little bit more non-traditional. I think that would be amazing as well. I noticed I accidentally colored the top of my clock tower with blue. I just went over it with red. The snow is actually this little band around it right here. And finally, my last little house that even has an adorable little wreath on the door. It's going to have some black shutters, a black door, roof with a little red trim, some snow, and even smoke coming out of the chimney. Once I get these three images colored, I am going to die cut them. And these three buildings have coordinating dies. And they're going to go along that snowy border that I stamped earlier, which is a nice guideline, plus a great place to ground the trees and the light post that I stamped and colored previously. And these are going to fit in between all of those. I almost thought of this as layers. We've got our sky, we've got our mountains, the trees, and then the village layer. And then in between those two, I'm going to stamp another snowy layer here in a bit for Santa and Mrs. Claus. So that would be the next layer. And finally ending with the train layer. So I've stamped that now. I added another little signpost. I've got some other stamps laid out to stamp here, including an adorable little snowman, which I kept trying to stamp earlier and I wasn't sure. So I held off on him until I got to the end. And I thought a candy cane would be fun too. There are just so many images. This is a stamp set where when you pick it up, you maybe are drawn to a few of the images, but when you go back for accessory images, I think you find yourself amazed at what is in the stamp set because there is so much there. And it makes it incredible for creating some really awesome scenes. So that snowman, again, a few shades of blue just to give him that snowy look. His little hat, his little scarf, little carrot nose, the little candy cane in red, the signage, reds and greens. Santa and Mrs. Claus, the only difference here is I needed some skin tone colors for their faces. Otherwise, all in reds, grays, and then a little green apron for Mrs. Claus. Then I will die cut these with the coordinating dies as well. Santa and Mrs. Claus also have coordinating dies. Really quick, there are the 3 borders. There's actually a city border as well. There are a couple of, or a tree-shaped die, I think the sleigh die, the buildings, Santa and Mrs. Claus. The silhouette of Santa and the reindeer has a die, and also the little dog sled has a die. So those are the coordinating dies that come with this set. The rest you'll have to be creative with how you scene build. Masking, or kind of like I did here with no masking, and just stamping the images to build a scene. I am adhering my background layers now, and I do have the house and the clock tower already adhered. We'll adhere the North Pole Station, Santa and Mrs. Claus standing here. I'm going to attach those with some glue dots. Bling mini glue dots are my favorite way to adhere small little images like this. And they're standing out here kind of waving hello or goodbye, however you want to think of it. I'm going to take a black glaze pen and add detail to the eyes, to the accents on the train, the railway, the wheels down here. I will add those there for the railway cars, buttons on the snowman, eyes on the snowman. Little things like this I wanted to add extra detail to. I don't want to go too crazy. The areas are all really small, so a lot of that won't particularly show up if you try to add too much, I think. And really, there's not a lot that's needed. These images are fantastically detailed as is. Once I have that done, I'm going to take glossy accents and go over the windows on all of the houses. I like the feeling of the glossy accents once it's all dry. It's a nice, slightly raised glossy finish, perfect for the windows. The spectacles on Mrs. Claus, I think they work great. The glass globe on the light pole, the windows on the train, all little areas like this. So I have a fine tip applicator, which makes it so much easier for these small little areas. Once I have the glossy accents on all of the windows and anything else like that, I'm going to set this aside to completely dry, and I will begin working on my next card. Now, I didn't originally plan to only use the Naughty Elves for my next card. I kind of thought I would incorporate both Elves sets, but the Naughty Elves really won out. I thought the greetings were hysterical, and as I was messing around and playing with the stamps, I thought it would be fun to make them kind of comic book or comic strip style with different little windows featuring a different little scene in each. So my first scene up at the top will be the elf sticking out his tongue with candy canes sticking out of his mouth, kind of going nanny nanny boo boo, is what it looks like to me. And the other elf, gearing up to throw or pitch that snowball right at him. There is a stack of snowball image. There's the flying snowball image. Then the next window is going to be the elf with his heels kicked up, munching on cookies with a package not wrapped very nice next to him, and a sign on the wall. He's sitting up at the desk with like that. The sign on the wall will read, "Naughty is the new nice," which is so cute, so funny. And finally, my last window will feature an elf sleeping on the job. He's got cookie or candy or something all over his face, and he's leaning back against a stack of presents, sleeping, this is where I switched out. The image you're going to see here down at the bottom is the elf carrying a stack of presents. That one is from the Little Nice Elves stamp set. And originally I wanted to use that one. I thought it fit in, but I changed my mind last minute. The other image is the elf with his tongue stuck to the North Pole signage, which is hysterical. My kids all thought this stamp set was the best. It's funny. These elves are adorable, and they make really fun cards. I think they would make really fun Christmas tags as well. I am going to design the greeting to read, "Dear Santa, I can't explain. I've been good," and then in parentheses it says "this week," and then it finally says "I really tried." I think that it's a really cute, comical take on Christmas elves. Again, I have stamped my images on smooth white cardstock, and I'm coloring them in with Copic markers. I grabbed a frame from my collection that I had. This is actually from Mama Elephant. It's called the Try Window. I went through my die collection to find window style dies that I thought would work to create this comic strip type of card design. And this one really worked the best for this particular one, where I kind of had 3 different windows that I wanted to make. And the background is all going to be very simple. The emphasis on this card is the elves and the greeting. And the greeting kind of moves throughout just like it would in a comic strip. The elves are all colored very similarly. They have red tops, green pants, little black shoes, red caps. I switched them up, some of their hair and their skin tones, just for fun. I think it adds a little bit of interest since I'm keeping to a pretty simple color palette. And I think they're so funny. Especially these first ones. I don't know why I found it so funny that one's throwing a snowball at another. It doesn't have to be this one that's sticking out his tongue, but I definitely thought that looks like something that would happen. Somebody's sticking out their tongue, kind of going ha ha ha, and the other one throwing a snowball. I try to keep, there's not too many of them here, but a lot of times if I have lots of images, I try to stamp them in the order that they go on the card so that I don't lose track. Because I often start out laying out the images I'm going to use, and then from there, to make sure everything will fit, and then from there I actually stamp them and color them. Between those, the laying it out, figuring it out, and getting them colored and die cut, sometimes I forget what goes where. This one's pretty self-explanatory and pretty easy. I just tried to get them as close together as possible to save as much paper. This little stack of presents, even though I'm not using this image, I just saved him. I'm going to use this little elf on a tag or another card because he's really, really cute. But the stack of gifts for the elf sleeping on the ground is going to be colored exactly the same as this one. In fact, the stack of gifts is pretty much the exact same stack of gifts, just a little bit bigger. North Pole signage, red and white with some nice black here. The sign itself has a nice border around it, which I colored with red. And the inside of the sign, I'm going to leave kind of a whitish or very, very light gray with warm gray, 3 and 0, 0. The snowballs have that just hint of blue to them to give them a little bit of that cold, snowy look. And then I'll die cut all of those images. Just like the main stamp set, some of the stamps in the add-ons don't have coordinating dies. The only 2 images that I used for this card that did not have coordinating dies are the Naughty is the New Nice signage and the gift package. And I will show you how I get around that here in a second. I went ahead and die cut my frame. I keep the little inside pieces and I'm inking them up very, very lightly, mostly just kind of around the edges. The bottom one just around the bottom edge, the middle around the sides, and then the top just around the top so that it kind of gives this soft muted gray. This is Hickory Smoke Distress ink. So a soft kind of muted blackish gray around the edges so that it's white, stays white in the middle. My last check before I actually put anything together, I almost always do this. I lay out my images. Before I commit to adhering anything, I like to make sure that what I was planning is still going to work. This is a great time for last minute changes. For example, I decided to switch out that one elf in the bottom left corner. The elf at the desk in the middle needs to be shifted over to the right to leave room for the greeting or the sign that's going to hang on the wall. Once I have that, I'm going to take my frame, place it in my MISTI so that I can stamp all of my greetings at once. I'm going to line those up on the frame itself and stamp those with some VersaFine ink. I like the VersaFine ink. It's nice and dark, crisp black. Once I have my stamps lined up, I'm going to pick those all up with the lid of the MISTI, double check that my frame is in place, ink up those greetings, and then stamp them right on the frame. Now I got a little ink on my magnet. If you do that, be sure that you wipe it off. Otherwise that ink, it's not going to dry on the magnet. Not the VersaFine ink anyway, stays on might. It will smear and smudge your project if you would flip it over and touch your paper. So make sure that you wipe it off because you will be so mad if you smudge your project. I don't know how I know that. Anyway, so just kind of be careful about that. VersaFine is a pigment ink and it tends to be a lot juicier than other inks, and so it kind of gets everywhere at times. While I have my MISTI out, I'm going to line up my signage and the gift package. These are those two images I was talking about that did not have coordinating dies. Since they don't have coordinating dies, I want to stamp them directly on the background. I kind of find it a fun challenge to figure out ways to incorporate both images with coordinating dies and the images that don't. So I'll stamp those with an ink for Copic coloring. The VersaFine will not work for that, unfortunately. And then I'm going to grab my Copics real quick and color in these images. Very similar. The signage is going to be real similar to the North Pole sign with a red border, some grays inside of here. The gift package, that's going to be red and green. And I love that this package is not wrapped nicely. It really goes with these elves being bad. Elves gone bad, I guess, is what this is. Go ahead and stamp and color in my final image, the one I decided to switch out. Die cut this, and then we're going to put it all together on a top fold card base. I like to take my frame and use it as a guide to place those inside pieces on my card base. The frame is actually going to be popped up with some foam adhesive. I like the look of it popped up a little bit. I like to use these thin foam adhesive squares to pop up my frame, but I don't really want to put a whole nother panel back behind. I really like the look of utilizing the little die cut inside pieces. So I take the frame, hold it in place, put some adhesive in each of the openings, and then pop those panels right where they go. Then I take the frame, put the foam adhesive squares behind it, and then pop it in place. And you can tell it's got a little bit of dimension to it now. And I'm going to attach my elves with foam adhesive as well. I like those popped up. Now the snowballs, the stack of snowballs, the snowball flying are going to be adhered directly on the card. instead of being popped up. That kind of helps coordinate and go with the feeling of the signage and the gift package in the second window, since they're flat in the background. I like the combination of both. If any of the foam adhesive squares are too wide, like for the legs of the table, I like to just cut them in half. There's my second window all finished. The last little window, we'll put the elf sleeping on the job down here. And I really like having part of them, the images tucked under pieces of the window, and parts of them layered outside of the frame, I guess, if that makes sense. I think it makes it look a lot more natural. Finally, we got the light pole here, and the elf sticking out his tongue with his tongue stuck to the light pole. And I think we all can probably know the movie, the movie references there with the Christmas Story. The whole time I'm imagining that in my head. I'm going to add a few highlights with a white opaque pen. And my Naughty Elves card is all finished. Finally, I'm going to briefly touch on my final project, which is this set of, I know I only showed 7 here. I dropped a tag and I couldn't find it. And of course, I found it as soon as I was done videoing and photographing everything. I made 8 tags. And these are made from the Mama Elephant Slim Trio tags. I just looked through my collection for tags that I thought would fit. I wanted something long and skinny. But I thought the Irreverent elf set here was perfect for gift tags. Funny gift tags. I'm a huge fan of gift tags for the holidays, and I really loved these. So what I did was die cut all of my elements. I've got fronts and backs for each. The white is the front, the red is the back. I'm going to stamp icons and greetings on each. I am not going to show the coloring and everything for these. The coloring is very similar to before. It's very simple. Some of them have coloring, some do not. I used my Misty to stamp everything. I love the little beer mug. And then the greeting reads, "It's the most wonderful time for a beer." I thought that was kind of hysterical. Slay in it, you're elfin amazing. Slay all day, you jingle my jangle. What the elf, you make my holly jolly. Happy holidays, you tickle my tinsel. But first, let me take a selfie. Elfie, not selfie. I thought that was funny. And no elfin way. There's tons of different funny, irreverent elf greetings. I stamped them, I colored them, I placed the tags back to back, and then I put the to and from the Naughty Elves. I stamped that on the back of each of the tags. Thanks for joining me today for the My Monthly Hero October kit and add-ons. I hope this has inspired you to create some Christmas-themed projects. The supplies I used to create these projects are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.